We're moving into John 12. Each gospel account of the Palm Sunday is slightly different. This is from the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition. John 12, 12 through 16. The next day, the great crowd that had come to the festival heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel." Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as it is written, "Do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. Lord, your King is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt." His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things had been written of him and had been done to him. The word of the Lord. When I was early married, about 21 years old, we went to Minnesota to our cabin on the 4th of July week. It was hot, it was sticky, and it was fun. There were water ski shows. How many of you have seen a water ski show? It is fun. I'd never seen one before. And they had walleye fish fries on Fridays, lots of dried beef to eat, and hot dish and pie to share. But one of the most delightful parts of the week was seeing a small, rural 4th of July parade. We found stellar seats and pulled out our old aluminum lawn chairs for the occasion. All around the lake, you see, was agriculture and many different varieties of farms. There were soybean and corn farms and dairy farms and sugar beet farms. How many of you heard of a sugar beet farm? It's pretty interesting. Each one, of course, in the parade displayed their best tractors. But the type of farming the parade honored most this particular year was pig farming. So to honor the tradition of pig farming in rural Minnesota, there was a hog, king, and queen. There was. And these cute young people, they sure were. They're riding on the back of a wagon full of hay, pulled by a John Deere. They were sitting up straight as a pin and wearing evening gowns and suits and their king and queen hog crowns. Now, I laughed out loud when I saw it, but I hushed right up because the crowd was really proud. Two of their own, representing the hard work of the farming community, crowned and displayed. They were king and queen for a day, and everyone celebrated as they paraded by. The crowd in the street waved their flags and tooted their horns. Some even cat whistled and cheered as the king and queen threw candy at the children. It was a special day in Green Lake, Minnesota, and the crowds were jubilant. The palm-waving parade where Jesus rode on a donkey would have been the same day that Pontius Pilate entered as well. Apparently, Pilate often made trips to Jerusalem during high and holy days in the Jewish calendar from his ocean palace in Caesarea Philippi. Now, Pilate was not doing this out of respect for the Jews, no. It was far more likely that Pilate visited Jerusalem during times like this because of his fear of a rebellion. The military presence needed to be strong where the Jews were gathering in numbers. The Romans knew they weren't too well loved in the area. It was only a matter of time before someone made a move against them, and they would be ready. But to have a carpenter from Galilee ride into Jerusalem on a donkey with palm-waving crowds crying out, "Hosanna," literally meaning "save us" in Hebrew, would have been in blinding contrast with the military procession that preceded Pilate's entrance into Jerusalem. In fact, it would have had a mocking effect, maybe even a dangerous one. How many of you have been watching The Chosen, the miniseries we mentioned a few weeks ago? The Chosen. If you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to. I'm not really much into religious films and documentaries because often they distort the truth so much. This one's pretty point on. And so many things that Ralph and I noticed really impressed us with the series. Jesus in the beginning is shown a little bit as a loner, which would have been right. He's most definitely a teacher, but in the beginning he performs miracles and teaches his parables in kind of small groups, not attracting much of a crowd. He was a different sort of king. The people, his own Jewish people, are in turmoil and anguish. They're oppressed, they're bullied, they're raped, they're mocked, and often killed by the Romans. And their own Jewish Sadducee and Pharisee leaders seem to have sided up a little bit with the Romans to make good. They sort of suck up to them to get what they need. The Roman taxation of the poor is killing the poor. Then there's the Jewish temple tax on top of the Roman tax. It's a lot for them to take. In the miniseries, The Chosen, the authors give an interpretation of the biblical text that just has a lot of merit. Visual reasons why perhaps Jesus was there to quietly object for his people. For example, the priests and rabbis of the temple are shown eating lavish food and wearing expensive garments and living in very nice homes. Yet they would not enter the poor district to serve the poor. They only served from the temple or taught in the temple court. Jesus, the one who sits up straight in the back of an ass going through a processional parade, eats with the poor, the outcast, and the rich all together. He has no restrictions on who he loves and who he teaches. Again, a complete juxtaposition compared to his Roman counterparts and Jewish leaders. In the text today, we hear from the book of Zechariah and the prophecy of the king riding on the ass. Look, your king will come to you. He's righteous and victorious. He's humble and riding on an ass, on a colt, the offspring of a donkey. A large crowd has gathered, and it's Sunday, the day after their Sabbath. The crowd had come for the Passover feast, and they had most likely heard of the resurrection of Lazarus from the dead. So we can expect that there was a growing messianic fervor, excitement in the air surrounding Jesus. But the people, the everyday people, were not nervous. They were excited, right? But the Pharisees and the Romans are getting more and more nervous about Jesus. The people, the Jewish people, are waiting to be saved. They were overcome with joy. Their Messiah had arrived. And as Jesus enters Jerusalem, palms like this were gathered and waved. Why do you think it was palms? Anybody know why it was palms? Just because they were available? Maybe, right? There's more to it than that, and I didn't know this until just recently. Listen to what theologian Edward Klink says. The crowd has palm branches in their possession for which there's ample evidence to regard its symbolism. While there's no Old Testament connection to palm branches and Passover, palm branches would have been immediately recognized by first-century Jews as a religious and political symbol. They were used as a religious symbol during the liturgies of the Feast of Tabernacle and Dedication, carrying a special significance in Judaism as a symbol for victory, resurrection, and authority, a palm branch. Thus, religiously, a palm branch served as a forecasted proclamation of the future triumph that God would provide for his people. The palms were important. Yet Jesus' rule as a king is very different than the kings that have been presented and anointed to the Jewish people for centuries. His rule over his people is not just external, but it's internal as well. He asks for a change of heart. He asks for a change of character in order to follow him. He's offering the people a very different kind of kingdom, one they've never experienced before. When I saw the parade in Minnesota, I was taken aback because to see a hog king and queen seemed kind of silly to me. It was strange and foreign. Yet the people living there, to them it was wonderful. Wonderful. You see, word had gotten out about Jesus, and his ride into the city was not what they had expected at all. He should have ridden into the streets of Jerusalem on a large white horse fitting to his new position as King of the Jews. Yet they did not know that their king entered Jerusalem on this donkey to ride to his death, which is a critical point in our talking about this centuries later. Our celebration today, the waving of the palms, the singing of Hosanna, save us, is no less significant, my friends, today than it was thousands of years ago. Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice here. This parade is connected to his death and his resurrection. His resurrection was the key to our salvation. So it's highly significant right now. Think about it. We are still a hurting people. A hurting people. There's so much corruption and pain in our world. Hosanna, Jesus, save us, still seems applicable, doesn't it? But what do we do about it? Well, the first thing we do is we model Jesus and we take notice of the people in need around us. And to be frank, in this church right here, I think we do what we're doing right now. Here at Big Cove, we do two things that are sit-up worthy, that Jesus is noticing that we do. First, missionally, we don't just choose mission partnerships because they look good or they feel good. Many nonprofits out there do great work, but giving money to them can end up just being a feel-good thing. Here at Big Cove, we choose mission partnerships because of what they're doing on the ground floor to eradicate generational poverty, homelessness, and hunger. And our vision here clearly states that we intentionally seek out situations where we can offer a presence, one that just says, God loves you. It doesn't always mean giving cash. Second, we form relationships with these partnerships. So by getting to know the staff and sometimes the clients, we can build a better tomorrow for those who are trying to climb out of poverty, homelessness, and food insecurity. Like Jesus sat up straight on that meager donkey and looked around. Jesus is looking around right now at us and saying, hey, way to go. Big Cove's on track. You're doing a good job, most definitely. So in order to continue to learn from the Bible, to use the biblical text towards a purpose, we need to keep asking ourselves important questions. Keep ourselves accountable all the time. And now that we've discussed where Big Cove stands on the sit-up and take notice journey, the next question to ask is, how do we personally sit up and take notice and see what Jesus sees? What do we see in our neighborhoods, in our families, in our workplaces? Sitting up and taking notice of those around us and what we can do to help. I think that we just need to be diligent in the way we look around us, like Jesus did as he rode into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. Remember, I almost made the mistake of making fun of the hog king and queen of Minnesota, didn't I? I needed at that very moment to stop and take notice, to sit up straight, look around. It was a different culture. Not different, worse, just different. And I needed to be more accepting in that moment. So let's all think about our personal situations and what Jesus might notice within our lives, and reflect on the things we can do to help, Sarah, as we watch this small slideshow. Now, Jesus is with us and in us as we serve, and he depends on us, friends, to be his hands, his feet all the time. And as much as we depend on him to guide us and lead us and be with us as we serve. Things we can do. This one's most important. It really is. Who doesn't love to give flowers? to say a word. Just sit. Just be present. Do we do this enough? All these things that we can do, that we can be present in people's lives. Ralph and I learned something a long time ago from a pastor friend of ours, and they said, don't worry about what you're going to say. It doesn't matter what you say. Just show up. Just show up. I've told some of you this, but maybe not all of you. I suffered many miscarriages. I lost 6 children. And when I lost the twins, there were no words. There were no words at all to describe the pain that I felt. But I had a friend. People came and they said things and they did things, and I didn't help, really. But one person came, and they sat in the front step with me. I'll never forget it. And she brought warm cookies and just sat next to me, didn't say a word, put her arm around me, and we ate cookies together. That was so wonderful. Just being present with someone else really makes a difference. So friends, be thinking about this week what this means to you, how we can make a difference in people's lives. God is looking around, just like Jesus did on that donkey. How do we look around? Just make a small difference. It matters. Amen.